Hey, this is Darren. I've been working with yarn for over 20 years, and over that time, I've learned quite a bit and picked up a lot of tricks. And now with the help of my friends from Joann's, I'm going to be able to share some of that knowledge with you. Okay, I think we have everything we need. Let's go home and make stuff.
Welcome everybody to this Introduction to Knitting Cables class with Lion Brand Yarn and Joann. Darren is your teacher there on screen. He's going to teach us this magical technique that's not really as hard as it looks. My name's Claire. I'll be hanging out in the chat with you. If you do need to ask any questions during the course of class, please use the chat on YouTube. And while you're there, let us know where you're watching from. We're interested to see whether you're here on the East Coast with us or tuning in from farther away. Just to let you know that there is a brief delay from the platform we are using to what you're seeing on YouTube. So if we're a little bit awkward in answering questions and have to go back and forth, that is perfectly fine. This is our first class with Joann, so bear with us if we have any technical difficulties. This class is also being recorded, so if you need to come back and watch it again to cover any technique you might have missed, it'll be available on the Lion Brand YouTube channel in about 24 to 48 hours. And if you missed getting the handout, I'll go ahead and put the link to that in the chat periodically in case you need it. And now that all of that is out of the way, we'll turn it over to Darren.
All right, welcome to class. And today, as Claire mentioned, we are learning how to knit cables. So cables, as in this vest that I'm wearing, cables can add a lot of texture and different design to your projects. They look very hard. They look very impressive when you see cables. And sometimes they are very hard and very complicated, but most of the time they're actually really simple and there's not much to them at all. When I first learned how to do cables, I thought it was going to be this wonderful, this great thing to undertake, this big project. I was on vacation and I had yarn and needles and I was going to learn how to do cables and I had all this time set aside. And it really wasn't that hard to learn. It was actually quite easy. So that's the good news and the bad news. It's really not so hard to learn, but you, like anything, if you want to make it really complicated, you can really add a lot of different types of cables into your projects to help make them even more and more challenging. But starting out, they're not very hard at all. Just a little bit about cables, a little bit about what they look like. Let's go ahead and change the view to the view of my hands, and we're going to look at some different types of cables so you know what I'm talking about. This cable right here, this long kind of twisted braid, is pretty much the basic cable. It's the most basic one, very easy to do, and you can see it really adds quite a punch. It adds a lot of interest to a project. We're going to learn how to do this one. This is a traveling cable, which we're not going to cover today, but we are going to cover all of the information you'll need to learn how to do this traveling cable. So it's something for future learning. This cable right here, we're going to learn to do this one today, and it's very similar to the first one I showed you. If you look at the cables, you'll notice that the cables are almost always made with knit stitches, and then there's a background behind them of purl stitches, and that's really what helps to make the cables stand out so that you really see them. This sweater here is all knit stitches and it has cables. There are no purl stitches to set them apart. So this is called a blind cable, where the cables are just all knit and there are no columns of purls in between. So it gives it a complete different look. So just by making a few changes in the types of stitches you're using, you can really make a huge huge difference in the way your project turns out. So today in class, I'm going to be demonstrating with this yarn, which is called Hometown. And this yarn's by Lion Brand, and it's available on lionbrand.com or joanns.com. And I'm going to be demonstrating with the color called Dallas Gray. And that is... So let's just go ahead and look at our handout. I have a lot of teachers.
I'm going to backtrack for a minute, Darren, here.
Okay.
You said you were demonstrating with Hometown, but I know the pattern calls for a much thinner yarn. Can you explain why you like to use a different yarn to demonstrate with?
Absolutely. So the pattern that we're going to that we've given to you as an option to practice your cables with is using this yarn called Basic Stitch Anti-Pilling. And this is a very good yarn. It's a very nice yarn to work with. But I have found for demonstrating, especially online with the cameras, this yarn actually shows up quite a bit better because it's so much thicker. So I do really like to teach with this yarn because the stitches are thicker. It's easier for students to see what I'm doing over camera. And this is a great yarn for projects as well. But this one is the one that the pattern is recommending. So that's the reason I'm using this thicker yarn, because it's better for teaching. I found it better for teaching. I feel like people can see what I'm doing much easier. Okay. Any other questions?
Nope. I think we are ready to continue on with learning how to do some cables.
Okay. So just so you know in advance, you only need one special tool for cables. So your normal knitting needles, whatever project you're going to do, are pretty standard. You do need a cable needle, and these needles are going to hold our stitches temporarily, and that's why they're shaped a little bit different. This one is like a short double-pointed needle, and it has little notches kind of cut into it. And if you don't have any type of cable needle, you can use just a regular double-pointed needle or something like a chopstick that you might have on hand already, right? So cables are created by knitting stitches out of order or by knitting them and then changing the order. Cables can be worked as few as 2 stitches or as many as you like. So you can cross 1 stitch over 1 or 5 over 5, 10 over 10, any combination. A cable worked over 6 stitches might have 3 stitches transferred to a cable needle and held to the front or to the back of the fabric. And then the following 3 stitches will be worked. And then the 3 stitches that were held on the cable needle will be worked. Cables are often written as twists or cable crosses. For the example that I'm going to be showing first, we're going to be working with 3 stitches. And these are written as, let's see if we can get a close-up of this, 3/3LC, and that stands for 3 stitches over 3 stitches, and that creates a left cross, or 3/3RC, and that's 3 stitches over 3 stitches, and that will create a right cross. And so I'm going to show you how to do a left and a right cross and how to create the difference. And so let's go ahead and jump right into our exercise. And for this first exercise, it wants us to cast on 18 stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and start. If you want to work along with me or just watch, either way will be fine. So with cables, mainly what you're going to be doing is just knitting and purling the way that you always have. There's not a lot of changes happening at first. So we're going to be casting on, so cast on 18 stitches. Row 1, which is the right side, we're going to purl 2, knit 6, purl 2, knit 6. And then we're going to work row 2, just knitting the knits and purling the purls as established. And when we get to row 3, that's where the excitement and the new learning is going to take place. So on row 3, we're going to purl 2, 3/3 RC, which is a right cross, purl 2, 3/3 LC, which is a left cross, and end with a purl 2. And I've gone ahead and I made my cast on and I worked the first 2 rows. So I'm ready to start with my cable cross. So I'm going to purl 2 to start the row. And if you have any questions as I'm going, please don't hesitate to ask any questions. And I'm going to do a 3/3 RC. So if you look above, it does give you the key or the definition of 3/3 RC. Slip 3 stitches purlwise. Now you're always slipping stitches purlwise, and unless it says other to do it knitwise. So always do it purlwise. You're going to slip 3 stitches to the cable needle and hold them to the back, and that's what causes it to lean to the right. Knit the next 3 stitches from your left hand needle and then knit the 3 stitches from the cable needle. Right, so I'm going to slip 3 stitches purlwise. So you enter the stitch as if to purl. So 1, 2, 3. Hold it to the back. And then I'm going to knit 3 stitches from my working needle just like normal. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to let my left hand needle just rest. And then I'm going to knit the stitches from my cable needle. Now, when you're knitting from your cable needle, you want to just take an extra second and double check. It's easy to kind of twist it one way or the other. You want to make sure you're knitting into knit stitches. So I'm looking here and I'm seeing my knit stitches, so I know that's correct. It's easy to twist it by mistake, and I'm looking at purl stitches here. So if you're looking at purl stitches, then you're doing it wrong. So just take that extra second and double check. I'm going to knit my working yarn, knit 3 stitches from my cable needle, knitting into knit stitches. And my first cable cross was complete. And now I'm going to do my purl 2 according to my pattern. And then I'm going to do my 3/3 LC. And this one is going to lean to the left. So I'm going to transfer 3 stitches to my cable needle. It's nice if they can kind of rest in that J shape. And I'm going to hold it to the front, and that's what's going to make it lean to the left. And I'm going to knit 3 stitches from my left hand needle just like normal knitting. And now I'm going to knit them from my cable needle. And it's really easy when you're holding it to the front to see that you're knitting into knit stitches. You're not going to twist it by mistake. So I'm going to knit 3 stitches from my cable. And it might seem a little weird at first, but it's not so tricky really. Whoops, it fell out. So I'm going to finish my 3rd one that way. And then I'm going to do my last 2 purl stitches, and then we're going to look and see what we've done. Okay. And at this point, you're expecting to see amazing things happening. And what does that look like? That looks like a big old mess, right? So what's going on is cables don't really start to take shape until after you do the second twist. So if you do your first row of your cable twist and it kind of looks like a big mess like this, that is normal. But if you look carefully, I don't know if you guys can see, you can see that it's starting to lean this direction. It's changing the direction of the stitches, and this one is leaning this way. But other than that, it looks like a hot mess. So let's see what's going to happen next. So when we refer back to the pattern, we worked row 3, which was our cable cross. Row 4 and all wrong side rows, you're going to knit the knits and purl the purls. That's easy. And row 5, you're going to purl 2, knit 6, purl 2, knit 6. That's basically just knitting the knits and purling the purls. Row 7, same thing. So pretty much between rows 3 clear up to row 9, you're just knitting and purling like normal. So it's a nice break. It's a nice little rest. When you get to row 9, that's when you're going to do your next twist. 3/3 RC, purl 2, 3/3 LC. Okay. So I've worked up to row 9. So we can go ahead and make that twist. And you can already see this is looking better than what it did. So here was my first little swatch. I just did my twist and I didn't do anything past the twist. And it looks really kind of messy. I didn't do another twist yet, but I did knit several rows up. And you can already see it is changing the texture of my fabric, and you can see the different directions. So by the time I do the next twist, it's going to start to look like something and look more exciting. Okay, so before I move on, I know I've covered a lot. Are there any questions about anything I've covered so far? I'm going to show you how to do the cable twist in this next row. So any questions?
I was going to go back to something you said earlier when you say you're just knitting the stitches as normal, but I know for some people, the way you hold your yarn might not be normal. So I just wanted to clarify that for anybody who's watching now or later, that Darren knits. I guess you knit English, but with the yarn in your left hand?
Yeah,
I'm not sure what you'd call it.
I'm not sure what you'd call it either, but when I say knit or purl, just like normal, that is whatever is normal for you. So just a normal knit and a normal purl. And I'm stressing that because sometimes when people learn, when they're thinking about learning cables, they feel like the whole project is going to be like this whole new undertaking. But for the most part, you're only learning doing anything new, like every 6 rows, every 8 rows, depending on the cable. So yeah, when I say knit or purl, just like normal, that is the normal knitting or purling for you. There's more than one way to hold your yarn. Okay. Anything else?
And Chris agreed that I think both of us say that cables are easier than a lot of people think. And that once
So
you
much
get
easier.
the hang of how they're twisting, that you can make a beautifully intricate garment. But all you really need to know is how to knit and how to purl.
How to knit and how to purl. That's it. And however you knit or purl is the right way for you. So I'm going to do the next cable cross. So I'm going to do my purl 2. And let's refer back to the pattern so we don't get mixed up. I am doing a 3/3 RC. So that means 3 stitches over 3 stitches with a right leaning cable. So I have a little memory crutch to help you remember how you're going to hold your yarn in the front or the back. So I'm going to slip 3 stitches purlwise onto my cable needle. And I want this to lean.
And by yarn, Darren means how you hold the cable needle.
Yes, I'm sorry. You got me all mixed up with how I'm holding my yarn and stuff. So depending on where the cable needle is positioned will determine if your cable is leaning to the right or to the left. So this one, it's supposed to lean to the right. And so I'm going to hold my cable needle in the back. And so a little memory crutch is you can say to yourself, I'll be right back. I'll be right back, meaning my cable is going to lean to the right. So I put my cable needle into the back. And then I'm going to work my next 3 stitches. And now I'm going to work them from my cable needle. Again, just double check and make sure you don't have it twisted. You're knitting into knit stitches. Oops. Find your working yarn. And so you're knitting just the way you normally knit. Not a special technique. You're just knitting from a different needle. And I'm going to purl 2 according to my pattern. And this one is a 3/3 LC. So this one should lean to the left. So I'm going to slip 3 stitches on, slipping them purlwise. So you enter the stitch as if you were going to purl it and slip it off. And I'm going to hold my cable needle this time in the front. And so a little memory crutch you can say is I left the front door open. So my cable is going to lean to the left. I left my front door open, and you're going to hold it in the front. And then I'm going to knit 3 stitches from my left-hand needle. And I'm going to knit 3 stitches from my cable needle. And we're going to look and see what we've done. And finish my purl 2. Okay, I'm going to take a break, look and see what we've done. And if you guys have any questions, please let me know. So now that I've knitted 2 repeats of my pattern, you can clearly see, let me see, is that better? You can clearly see that this cable is twisting, and this one is twisting to the right, and this one is twisting to the left. And it's kind of creating this shape that direction. So what I think one of the hardest things about doing cables is keeping track of what row you're on, because sometimes it's hard to count your rows when you're doing cables. You want to look and see when you did the cable cross. And if you try to go back and count, sometimes it's like which stitch was the cross actually on? Was it this one or was it? And so sometimes it's hard to determine that. One thing I like to do is I will put a stitch marker every time I start or finish a new row. And then you count your stitch markers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In this case, I'm doing a twist every 6 rows. And so that way I can always keep track of where I am. Another thing you can do as you're following your pattern, you can do a little check mark at the end of each row, so that way you're sure you did each row. But you don't want to, if you're supposed to change it every 6 rows and you change it every 8 and then every 6 and then every 4, it's going to look really random and it's not going to look as nice. So is that better with it? Might be better without that bright light. So keeping track of what row you're on is, in my opinion, the hardest part about doing cables. But other than that, they're pretty easy. Okay. Any questions about anything so far?
I know Darren is a big fan of stitch markers, and he's using them there to count the rows. Personally, when I'm doing something like a cable pattern, I like those little clicky row counters. I think I have a couple, and I like the ones that they lock. So when you put them back in your project bag, they don't accidentally click themselves.
Yeah.
Yep. But I find that, the audible click sort of reminds me that, okay, I finished this row. I can move on to the next. And then sometimes I can stop and think, did I hear a click?
Yeah, for me, it would always be like, did I click it? Did I not click it? Was that last row? I would never be sure. And so that's why I like these, because you can see them and you're sure they're there. Whatever system works best for you. I have other friends that they do the check marks. And if they've made a pattern more than once, you'll see several checks on each row because they're doing it each time. Any system that works for you to help you keep track is the right system. So Any other questions?
Ooh, another good comment. Someone mentioned using an app like Knit Companion that I know some of them you can like import your cable pattern and sort of, touch the screen or something. Obviously, I do not use these, so I'm not 100% sure on how they work, but I know that's another solution if you are someone who likes to use like your iPad or a tablet to read the pattern.
Yeah, all these young people that are tech savvy. It's a miracle I'm online today, so I don't see me using an app to do it. But again, whatever system works best is the best system for you. So, anything else? So, just a little bit about cables, just a few general rules or general statements. When you're making cables, sometimes it does make your tension or your gauge a little tighter because you're twisting them and taking them over top of each other. Sometimes you do get pulled in a little bit tighter, so your gauge might be a little tighter than it usually is. So just kind of keep that in mind. And cabled fabric is a little warmer. The extra layers of the fabric layering over top of each other does add a little extra warmth, and that's one thing that makes them very nice. Okay. We ready to see the next one, or do we have any more questions about this one?
I think we are all set to move on here, Darren.
Okay. Let me move these samples out of the way. We'll get started on our next one. Okay. So with this next pattern, we do have some more things to talk about, an opportunity to learn a little bit more. Cabled instructions can be presented in many different ways. Sometimes, like the previous pattern we had, they're going to be written out, and then other times you might see them presented in a chart. And in a really nice pattern, they'll be presented written out and in a chart. And if you find it confusing, you can compare the two and make sure you understand exactly what's happening. So I really like it if they give you both choices, but sometimes they usually only give you one or the other. Different designers and publications might use different symbols to represent the same stitches. So it is very important that you look at the key of the chart and familiarize yourself with what they're trying to represent. There are kind of standard symbols, and it's kind of not like a hard and fast rule. So people can make up whatever symbol they want to mean whatever they want. So you just have to double check. So here is the chart. And when you're reading a knitting chart, you want to look at these numbers. And the numbers are going to indicate to you in the order of the chart how you're going to be progressing. So if you're reading a book or reading a page, you always start at the top left. But in a knitting chart, you're going to start in the bottom right. And that's why they have a number 1 there. And so you work across, and then you do number 2, and then you go back across this way. Number 3, back across. Number 4. So you're going in kind of a zigzag. There's a word, I can't really pronounce it. It's balstrophodonically. That's not how you pronounce it, but it means as the ox plows the field. And so if you were plowing a field, this is kind of the pattern that you would go in. So remember that. If you're knitting in the round, a lot of things will change about the way the chart is, but the main thing you want to look at is where are the numbers. So if the numbers are going this direction, then you follow the numbers in numeric order. Okay. Another thing about a chart, it is a visual representation of the front of your work. And so the front of your work is just represented by each one of these boxes. So each box represents a stitch. The stitch with the asterisks in it, if you look down here, it's purl on the right side, knit on the wrong side. And then a box that's empty, with just like an empty box, you knit on the right side and purl on the wrong side. And then when we have these special symbols, and if you look, this big rectangle, it takes up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes. So that represents 6 stitches. And these little dashes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's representing those 6 stitches. They're not going straight up and down as the other stitches are. That's why they're represented different, because that's where our twist is going to happen. And so if they're leaning that direction, so these little slants are leaning to the right, that means it's going to be a right cable. So 3/3 RC, 3 stitches over 3 stitches leaning to the right. And that sounds exactly like what we were just doing, which it is what we were just doing, but it's just the information is presented to us in a new way. These stitches, these little slashes are leaning to the left. So that is a 3/3 LC, which is 3 stitches over 3 stitches leaning to the left. So it's exactly the same thing we were just doing. The stitches are presented in a different way as well. We don't have any purl stitches in between. So before we had 2 purl stitches at the beginning, 2 purl stitches in the middle, and 2 purl stitches at the end. And that created a certain look. And in this situation, we have 3 purl stitches at the beginning, no purl stitches in the middle at all, and then 3 purl stitches at the end. And that's going to give us a complete different look, something very exciting and new, but we're not doing anything new. We're just doing the same thing we already did. And that's one thing that makes cables very fun, is just by changing up a little bit of your stitch placement, you can create a whole new look. And so the new look we're going to achieve is this. It's kind of like a horseshoe. So we have the shapes coming this way. Whereas before, when we had the purl stitches in the middle separating them, we get two separate twists. When we don't have the purl stitches separating them, then they kind of come together and create this horseshoe shape. All right. Any questions about reading a chart or anything we've covered so far? Any questions at all?
I think comparing those two swatches is a good example of how just changing, the placement of the cables or the stitches between them can really change the overall look of your project.
Yeah, and when you kind of look at it, you kind of see how those two columns kind of create that. But, if I did my next twist, then it would look more like this. Like you would see, you end up with more of the twisted braid. So it's really a lot of fun. You can create so many different looks without even learning anything new, because this is the same thing we've already done. Okay. So let me show you how to do this one. And I'm going to use this different cable needle just for demonstrating purposes. So we're going to purl 3. So actually, this is one that I've worked on, obviously, previously. And I am right here. I've worked it up to the place where I'm going to do my cable twist. So I'm ready to do my cable twist. So I'm going to purl 3. Purl 3. And I'm going to refer to my chart. I'm going to do my 3/3 RC, slip 3 stitches purlwise to a cable needle and hold to the back. And that cable needle just fell on the floor, so I'm going to use this one instead. So slipping them purlwise, 1, 2, 3, hold them to the back, so I'll be right back. And then knit 3, just the way you always knit. And then I'm going to knit 3 from my cable needle. Position your yarn in the right position for knitting. I split my yarn here. Okay. So now I'm going to jump right into my next cable, because as you can see, the cable instructions are bumped right up next to each other, so there are no stitches in between. So slip 3 stitches purlwise. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to hold it to the front. So left the front door open. So it's going to lean to the left if I hold it to the front. Knit 3 stitches. Normal knitting. And then I'm going to knit 3 stitches from my cable needle. Just like normal. And then I'm going to purl my last 3 as per instructed by my chart. All right, and I finished that row. Okay. And you can see it's starting to create this next kind of horseshoe shape. So right up out that way. And then the next row, I don't have enough yarn to complete my next row, but what you do is you just continue on. You would knit your knits as established, purl your purls, and then knit your knits. Just as you see knit stitches or purl stitches, work them as what they are. Same thing when you get back to the front. Everything else is just going to be knitting and purling as normal. No other cable twists or nothing else unusual is going to happen for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You'll knit and purl 9 rows, just like you always have. And then you're going to have the cable cross happen again. So every 10 rows, you're going to be doing a cable cross. So you get all of this exciting texture, but you're really only doing anything hard or anything unusual every 10 rows. So it's very minimal, really, the amount of effort you're putting in, but look at the excitement that you can create on your work. So I'm going to rest right here for just a second and see if anyone has any questions about anything we've covered so far. Any questions about anything?
I think what you just mentioned there, Darren, about how you can get sort of, a nice texture that looks really impressive, but you're only doing anything different on like 1 row out of 10 or 6 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's kind of what I like about cables.
That's what I love that about cables. And as knitters, we want to tell all other knitters how easy cables are. Try to encourage people to do cables because we always want to share information. But for non-knitters, we just want to let them go ahead and think it's complicated and crazy because we want to accept all the extra credit we can get, right? But so if you make somebody a knitted hat and give it to them and they're not a knitter and they just look at it and they're shocked and amazed, just be like, yeah, it's super hard. So anything else? Any other questions?
That was it.
Okay. So we could move on to the next one if we're ready to. But reading a chart is a lot of fun. So if you don't have any experience with chart reading, you'll run into charts when you're working Fair Isle projects and lace, possibly other things as well. I mean, charts are really a lot of fun to read, and they just present the information in a different way. So it's always nice to be able to understand information presented to you in different ways. So I encourage you to learn and get comfortable with a chart.
Speaking of charts, Darren, do you have any tips for, say, if you have, a particularly complicated chart or you're just having a hard time focusing on which row that you're doing?
Yes, because that is the story of my life. I always have trouble focusing. Thank you for, I almost forgot to point this out. So if you have a Post-it note, this is another way of keeping track of where you are on the chart or in a pattern. So if I'm going to start with row 1, and then I'm ready to move on to row 2, ready to move on to row 3. And these rows are all pretty simple, so they're not quite so hard to keep track of, but sometimes they do get very, very complicated. And so you just move the chart, the Post-it note up every time you finish a row. And if you're like me, I have sometimes especially hard time focusing on which line that I'm on. Sometimes my eye wants to go up or down. You can use 2 Post-it notes to really block everything out except for what you're working on. So I do love this Post-it note trick or theory. And if it's a particularly complicated chart, you don't really see the benefit of it here because this is pretty simple. But if it's a very complex chart, sometimes on a sweater or something, you might have like 10 different cables moving across the front of the sweater, and they might all be crossing over at different times. So they can get quite, it could be quite complicated at times reading a chart. Okay, anything else?
I think that was the gist of the question, but I would also say I think you mentioned it, that different charts can use different symbols for the same stitches.
Yes.
So make sure that even if, you've made a million cabled sweaters before or anything like that, still take a look at the symbol key and make sure that those symbols mean what you think they mean.
We're going to get to that right now because this one is a bit tricky for me. Sometimes things are tricky for some people and not for other people. So we're going to see how you guys feel about this one. So this next chart is instructing how to make this honeycomb pattern, which I think is really cute. And I've got it on the front of my sweater that I made the sweater vest. And it creates these honeycombs and these little pockets of air. And if you look at the back of it, it kind of creates these. And it's very insulating and it's very warm. It's kind of like the thermal underwear that has that waffle pattern. So it's similar to that. So it's going to be a very nice, warm, and very soft kind of plush fabric. So it's very nice. And the chart that we're looking at, the first row, we're going to have some excitement where we do our crosses. And then we work 1, 2, 3, and then the next one. So every 4 rows, we're going to do our cable crosses. And on the first one, we're going to hold our work to the back. And then the next one, we're going to hold it to the front. And then it changes on row 5. We're going to do the opposite. We're going to hold it in the front and then hold it in the back. And what that is going to create, it creates, if you just look at one cable, it kind of creates a wavy line like this. It creates, I'm going to kind of show you that right here. So this is one cable right here, and it kind of creates this wavy, this line. So if I hold it in the back, then it's going to lean to the right. If I hold it in the front, it's going to lean to the left. Hold it to the back, leans to the right. Hold it in the front, it leans to the left. So that's what creates this. And sometimes you'll see a chart having you work in this way, and it might be creating a vine or like the branches of a tree. It could be creating a picture. I've seen cables that create like a skeleton or deer antlers. So there's all kinds of things that you can do, and it just will create a different type of a shape. But when you put these squiggly lines together, they create these circles because they kind of come back together here. They separate and come back. So this one is squiggling that way, and this one is squiggling the other way. And that's what creates these little honeycomb pockets. So it's actually, again, it's doing the same thing we've been doing, nothing different. The only difference is we're doing it in a different order and the way our stitches are arranged, because there are no purl stitches again in this, just on the edge to create this little border. No purl stitches in the middle. Okay. So let's look at the chart. Oopsie, sorry. So the solid squares are knit on the right side, purl on the wrong side. The ones with the dash in them are purl on the right side, knit on the wrong side. Now these little symbols here I found were kind of tricky because this slash here leans to the right, but these two dashes that are representing the stitches, because we're having there's two dashes, so that represents two stitches. They're leaning to the left, so it's leaning to the right and it's leaning to the left. So I found that confusing. I didn't particularly love that symbol as much. But if you look at what it means, it's 4 stitches. So they're just telling us 4 stitches. They're not giving us 2 over 2. They're just saying 4. So 4 stitches, which is a right cross. But if you look at it, because the stitches are divided into 2 separate groups of 2, it's telling us 2 stitches over 2 stitches. And this one, this big slash, is going to the left, but the stitches are leaning to the right. So again, I found that confusing. But it is a 4-stitch left cable cross. So we know what that means. And one thing that I did to kind of help keep it clear in my brain, because when I'm looking at things leaning to the left and leaning to the right, I found it very confusing. I just put a B. So I'm going to hold my cable needle to the back, and I'm going to hold my cable needle to the front. And then up here, I put a F, hold it to the front and hold it to the back. So I don't really have to interpret the stitch each time. I can just look at my notes that I've made to kind of help myself. Any questions about that? Did anyone else find that confusing, or is it just me that finds it confusing? But it's presented differently than the other ones. It's the same information, but presented in a different way.
Yes, I don't think you're the only one that finds this sort of double slash situation a bit confusing, but I like your tip of putting the letters actually on the chart there. I think probably for me, I would have written R and L for right and left, but that's just the way my brain works. So whatever little notes help you.
Yeah, we're all different. See, I'm dyslexic, so right and left mean very little to me. I'm never sure what's right and what's left. But front and back, I understand. So that's why it makes more sense to me to write front and back. So whatever is going to be, whatever's going to make the most sense for you in that situation. But again, the thing that I want to really point out is doing the exact same thing that we've been doing, but just doing it in a different order. Instead of creating this horseshoe shape, now we're creating this honeycomb shape. And you could have these all in the same project. You could have a sweater where you're having honeycombs and then horseshoes and then a regular twist. And it looks like you're a cable genius because you just took this intro to cable class. Now you're making all these complicated patterns out of cables. You must be a genius. But the secret is it's actually, not so hard after all, right? So that's my favorite part about cables. It's just how easy they actually are to do. Any questions about anything so far?
I will give you a time check and let you know we've got just about 10 minutes left in class.
Okay, well, I think we've covered quite a bit. So I'm going to just do a quick little cable cross here. This one. So I've knit my I've purled my purl stitches. So I'm going to hold I'm 2 over 2, holding it to the back. So I'm going to put 2 on my cable needle, hold it to the back, and then knit 2. And then knit the 2 from my cable needle. So hold it to the back. The learning crutch is I'll be right back. And then I'm going to do my next one. which is slip 2 on, hold it to the front, and this is going to lead us to the next learning that I want to point out. So holding it, and then knit off the 2 off of my cable needle. Okay, so you can see I did my my right cross and my left cross, and then that's it. That's it. That's all it's giving me. But what you want to understand is it's telling us right here that this is an 8-stitch repeat. So to do the honeycomb pattern, you need a total of 8 stitches to do the repeat. So 8 stitches plus 4 to make this work. So I've got 2 stitches on each side to create a little border and 8 stitches to create my honeycomb. But if you're only creating 1 honeycomb, that's not as exciting as having 2 or 3 honeycombs, which really help to create the shape. So if you want more than just one, this would just give us this one kind of column of honeycombs, which could be really cute up the side of a sweater sleeve or on a scarf. But if you want a whole field of them to create the honeycomb shape, and you're designing your own, a designer would have already thought of this for you, but maybe you want to add a honeycomb to something you're making. You need to make sure you're working with a multiple of 8 stitches. So you could have 8, 16, 24, 48, anything that's divisible by 8. And then you want to add whatever stitches you want on your border. So a combination of 8 stitches plus, in this case, plus 4. And that's how knitting repeats work. So do we have any questions about knitting repeats and how that works? So I knitted this row here. Now to do another repeat, I'm just going to repeat that same, that's why it's called a repeat, because you just go back here and you repeat it. You go back here and you repeat it until you've done all of your repeats, and then you move on and do your border. So that, and you'll see knitting repeats like that in Fair Isle and also in lace. Could be in any other, lots of other situations as well. So that's what a knitting repeat is. Any questions? So the chart is just showing us 1 repeat, but I have a total of 3 on my little swatch I'm working. Always slip purlwise. This one leans to the left, so I'm going to hold it in the front. Slip 2 stitches purlwise. I'm going to lean this one in the back. Leans to the right, so I'm going to hold it in the back. So as I'm working across this row, do we have any questions about anything we've covered today?
What is your favorite type of cable needle to use?
I like this hook, this kind of J-shaped one, because like you saw me just do, like you can easily just, it's just so easy to work with. And then it hangs out of the way. I know a lot of other people like there's different shaped ones that, wait a minute, now I've lost where I was in this project. So there's different shaped ones where sometimes they're, instead of a hook like this, it's a straight needle, but it has kind of like a U shape. So instead of it being like a straight needle, it's like a double pointed needle, but right in the middle, it has like a little U shape, kind of like a little indentation, and you let the stitches rest there. And then the other needle, which I had, but I dropped it, it had the grooves. It's a straight needle and it's short, but it had the little grooves put in it, and that kind of keeps it from slipping off of your stitches that way. So, but I really like these J-shaped ones. What do you like best, Claire?
I like either of the other straight kinds, either the ones with like the little grooves in them or with the little dip in the middle.
So why don't you like the J-shaped ones?
It's too awkward, all that extra, I don't know, the upper leg of the J, I guess. It gets in my way.
Doing the exact opposite. I think it's less awkward because it's it just hangs out of the way. So yeah, so whatever you like best. But as you can see here, I dropped my stitches. Don't drop your stitches.
And one thing I don't think we mentioned, do cable needles have sizes, or what should you look for in terms of relation to the knitting needle size?
Very important. Cable needles do actually have sizes. As you can see, the ones that I have here are all different sizes. What you want, though, and what's very important is the stitches on your cable needle, they're not being shaped by the cable needle. They're being shaped by your knitting needle. So I'm knitting with this needle. I think it's a 13. This is what is shaping my stitches. The cable needle is just holding them. So I could use this one, which is pretty big, but it's smaller than my knitting needle. I could use this one, or I could use one that's very small, like a size like 2 or 3 cable needle. Doesn't make any difference because they're just holding the stitches until I'm ready to work them. They're not shaping the stitches. What you want to remember is if you're knitting with a size 6 needle or a smaller needle, you certainly wouldn't want to put your stitches on a needle this big because then this is going to stretch and reshape your stitches. So a general rule is you want your cable needle to be smaller than your working needle. And it could be just a little bit smaller or a lot smaller. It could be the same size, but you definitely do not want the cable needle to be larger than your working needle. I think that's the thing you want to remember. Because if you're putting this on a small stitch, it's really going to stretch it out. So like if I were working here and I were putting these stitches on this big needle, it's really going to stretch them and it's going to change the way it looks, and it's not going to look very nice. So you would want it to be a little smaller. Wouldn't you say, Claire?
Yes, exactly. What is that? Is that like Price is Right rules? Be as close as possible without going over?
I think so. Anything else that we missed that's important that we didn't mention? We're just about to the end. Any other questions at all? The next one is, we're not going to have time to cover this one, but this one is X's and O's, which is supposed to represent hugs and kisses. And this is just like the honeycomb pattern, except you're holding it back and front and back and front and back. And then up here it changes. It goes the opposite, front and back and front. So you just want to look. As you can see, I again made little notes so that it's easier for me to read. I want everything to be super easy when I'm knitting. I want it to be fun. I don't want to have to get confused or have to figure it out. So I am a big fan of making notes, but it's exactly the same thing we've been doing. You're just changing the position of your cable needle as you're working it, holding it in the front or in the back. So, and that one looks like this. So here's the X, and here's the O. And then this will be the O if it were finished, and this was the bottom part of the X. So, but for hugs and kisses. So hugs and kisses. So super cute, right? Any questions?
I'm going to go ahead and put the link to the handout in the chat again in case anybody needed that.
Okay.
think it might have gotten cut off earlier. I didn't know my character limit here in my chat box.
Oh no. And then this pattern that we gave you to practice your cable, it has a beautiful cable right down the center. I'm not going to review this whole pattern because it's basically just knits and purls as normal. But if you look here, 2/2 LC. So what does that mean? Does that sound like anything we can figure out? 2 stitches over 2 stitches left leaning cable. So if it's leaning to the left, you're going to hold it in the front. I left the front door open, and then 2/2 RC. That's easy. We know what that means. 2 stitches over 2 stitches right leaning. So if we want it in the right, we're going to hold our cable needle in the back. We'll be right back. So that's all you need to know to make this scarf or this shawl. Easy, super easy, right? Any questions at all? Anything else?
Easy breezy, beautiful cables.
I know, right? So if you do run into questions, if you're practicing and you come up with something you don't understand, feel free to contact me on Instagram. Maybe Claire will put my Instagram name in the chat. It's Mr. Mister, Mr. Woolly Bear. So just send me a direct message. I'll be glad to help out as much as I can. And on Facebook, it's just my name spelled out, and just send me a direct message. And I try to answer questions as soon as I can. So I hate the thought of you out there working and struggling with nowhere to go for help. So, and tag me if you make something. I'd love to see projects you make. So if you've made something with the cables, go ahead and tag me. I'd love to see it. So anything else, Claire? How we doing?
I think we're doing good. I'll also remind everybody that this class was recorded, and so it'll be available on the Lion Brand YouTube channel in about 24 to 48 hours. So if you needed to go back and watch anything again, you can do that as many times as needed.
Absolutely. All right. It just takes a lot of practice. So just keep practicing until you feel really secure with it. And then you're ready to start your first project, probably, maybe today and maybe in a couple days. So, all right. Thanks for coming to class. Have a good day.